Hello, I'm Jim Riley, and welcome to All the Right Connections. My guest this morning, James Reynolds,
Jim.
President of Mid-Hudson Cablevision. Dave, I always forget the title. Dave Finger, an old pal of mine, but your title is?
Chief Engineer, Jim.
Chief Engineer.
He should remember that by now.
You would think he would.
It's embarrassing. He told me to give me $10 if I got it right, and I couldn't remember. Listen, here's something.
You might want to have a teleprompter.
You know, I'm not even sure I'd get that right. Well, look, now that we said that, speaking of chief engineer, let's start today talking about the concept of a command center. So let's start with that. I call it a command center. How would you describe it?
Well, we don't have a command center per se.
Right.
But we have faced over the last several years and over the course of the history of the company several major events which have impacted service. And so each time that we have an event where, the weather or forces beyond our control, power outages, fires, force some kind of interruption in service, then there's always a core of employees at the company who are in communication in the background with each other, trying to figure out what's wrong, how do we fix it to get the service back on. And about a week or 10 days ago, we have a morning technical call every day, and we have all of the technical staff that's involved in keeping the system running on that call, and we discuss what are the priorities for the day, what important issues have to be escalated so that we get things resolved. And right after that call, somebody called me and they said, all of the city of Hudson is off, out of power.
Right.
So that's not good.
No.
And
not even close to being good.
And we have two plus major hub sites
In the city.
In the city.
Right.
Now, all of our hub sites have standby power.
Right.
And we also have a generator. And so immediately, Dave is in touch with Steve Renault, our CTO.
Right.
We're in touch with the zone leaders, the top technical staff. We're mobilizing to try to figure out why is power out, and let's make sure our network stays up.
Right.
And during that outage, I'm pleased to say that our network did stay up.
Right. Which
our
is
data
terribly
network.
important, yes.
And of course, because there's a lot of communication that goes on over the internet, and in fact, more than a year ago, there was a fire over in Athens, New York, in a pizza restaurant, and it was right underneath some of our main trunk of our fiber optic cable, and when it burned through there, it shut the whole system down.
Sure.
And I understand that Columbia County 911 was using Facebook to send messages to the public to let them know, what the status is and what's happening. But basically, what we do is we try to learn from each event, and if we see that because we didn't have enough standby battery power, or because something happened with the generator, we look for ways to have redundancy to be able to keep the system up. And we just wanted to make sure, and Dave knows a lot more about the actual protocol that is going on in the background, but customers, when their TV goes off, when their data connection stops, they want to get on the phone and say, when is this going to be restored?
Right.
And we wanted to make sure people know that we are there, we are in communicating, and we are working diligently to solve the problem and get them back on as soon as possible.
Right. Well, in fact, most of the time you don't go off at all, which is the really, I think, terribly important position to take is, if at all possible, you don't go down at all. But before we went on the air, Dave, you and I were talking about that experience in Athens, and maybe you just give people an idea of what took place in that particular incident, which I think will really clarify what we're talking about here.
Sure. Well, James mentioned that it's not a command center. It's a command structure.
Right.
It's a group of key people with different teams under them at their disposal. And so depending on what's off, a cut fiber or a burned fiber or the commercial power in Hudson, depending on what's off, that determines who we call
Right.
and where we dispatch them to.
Right.
In the case of the Athens fire, we had a fiber optic crew on the site while the firemen were still putting the fire out. So
Right.
we had to wait for the fire to be put out first.
Right.
And immediately after they had the fire out, they let us in, and we rolled the truck in there. I think it was within 4 hours we had service up and running, and there was over 400 strands of fiber burned.
Right.
So it was a big outage.
But you can see, James, with that structure in place, to be there waiting for the fire to be extinguished, the crew was ready to go to work and ready to get everything up and running again. And that's really what we're talking about, service to the customers.
Well, we have our own construction company. We have a crew that on a daily basis, they'll go out and they'll replace facilities, they'll build new facilities, and they were on call that morning, and they immediately responded, and I'm told that they were in the woods laying the fiber down, getting it ready. So when they got the go-ahead from the fire department to get in there and fix things, they had a jump on everybody. In fact, it was my information that we were up, as you say, after about 4 hours, and Verizon wasn't up until the next day.
Yeah.
So
and that whole idea of service, and I think to make that kind of commitment where you have the structure in place means you're going to be on top of these things as they occur.
Right, and there's a whole bunch of other protocol that we activate when we have problems. For example, in some cases we'll lose commercial power, and we've had we've gone out and we've invested in standby generators that the technicians have on their vehicle, and they'll actually go out to a location and they'll plug a standby generator into a power supply to keep a whole section of the system on.
Right.
Also, we've had events where in the summertime, our central location where in Catskill, where we have most of the electronics centralized, it uses an enormous amount of air conditioning. And you can imagine on a day when it's 90 degrees,
what you're dealing with.
Those things are struggling. And we've had a situation where 2 of our big units failed. And so we were really, at odds as to how to try to keep that building cool enough so that it doesn't damage the equipment. And as a result, we now have a standby, portable, commercial grade air conditioning in our warehouse so that if we have any kind of an event for one of our technical centers, we can keep it cool with this remote equipment. And,
right.
and that's the kind of structure that we try to, each event, we try to get back and go through it and say, how could we have done that better? How could we have activated service sooner?
What resources, could we? And that's really what you're talking about, Dave, is learning from each of these experiences.
We do, and we try to build on the redundancies. We build a redundancy on a redundancy on a redundancy.
Which you have to, because it's so important to keep the system up and running. Having said that, let's look at some of the upgrades to the data system and what's going on there, James.
Well, part of our planning for redundancy, and in particular for the data center, data centers, at least this is what I'm told by the technical people, data centers like to have diverse path. And what that means is they don't want to have one power line coming in and no other source of or no other exit from the building.
Because it doesn't matter any options you have in between. If you only have one source, you only have one source.
So you've got a plan, and the way the data network is laid out is that if we have a break in the fiber ring, they refer to it as a fiber ring. If you have a break here, that could knock the whole network out. But if you have a diverse path going back to the internet, then all traffic routes back over the diverse path, and you keep your network up.
Right.
And that's exactly what occurred when we had the fire in Athens, because we have a submarine cable under the Hudson River, and we didn't have another connection really to Columbia County.
Right.
Now we do. We've actually established a fiber path over the Rip Van Winkle Bridge or through a conduit, and so that gives us an alternative path should there be an event. And of course, we can't predict if somebody's going to dig up a fiber with a backhoe, or if there's going to be a fire, or if there's going to be an ice storm. But whatever happens, we want to have the network configured so that we can keep things going. And it won't always stay 100%, but you can bet that we will be in the background figuring out the fastest way to get the service back on.
Yeah, he almost laughed out loud when you're saying it, because whatever can happen will happen, won't it, Dave?
It does do that.
Yeah, as you look at it, someone who's the chief engineer and responsible for these things, you don't know what it's going to be.
Murphy's Law is alive and well.
You know something's going to happen. That's true, isn't it? But you were saying, and I think it's terribly important as we look at this upgrade to the data system as well, and we'll get into that a little more. That's why you have to stay on top of these things.
You do.
Yeah.
You have to stay on top of them. It's never perfect. You can just try and make it more and more perfect.
Right. And that's really the thing to do, to be proactive. Now, looking at the data system and the upgrades that you have to, let's talk specifically about that, James, and some of the issues related to that.
On any given weekend, I'm told that more than 30% of the bandwidth that we provide to all of our customers is consumed by people streaming Netflix. And if you think about that, it's pretty astounding statistic, because Netflix is one service, and you've got all these other services,
a host of other things,
and you've got more. We just learned the other day that Amazon is going to start producing programming, and part of their strategy is that they want people to come to Amazon, and while they're thinking about maybe streaming a program that's been produced, they might buy something.
That's right.
They might buy a TV.
Right. Yeah.
So that's their motive. But as more and more players jump into the programming game, bandwidth consumption or utilization is going to increase. So we've just had a major upgrade this summer, and we're told that bandwidth utilization is going to double every 18 months.
Right. And I don't want to talk badly about you, because we've been friends for a very long time. You know that the demand is always going to be more, because you know what use you get out of it. It's just going to keep increasing at a very rapid pace.
Correct.
And that's investment as well that you're going to have to make in the system.
Yeah, it's ongoing, and we've talked about this in previous programs, that it's not just build it and you're all set.
Right.
You build it, and then you wait for the as soon as we provide more bandwidth,
it's going to be
the subscribers consume it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's just so many variations, so many uses. How far out in advance do you have to look at these things, Dave, as an engineer, to make sure with these upgrades that you're staying ahead of that flow?
Well, James mentions 18 months, it doubles, and that's pretty accurate. But the way we do it is we watch the utilization.
Okay.
So we watch how many megabits are being streamed through the network. When that hits 50%, when we reach a 50% capacity, we start looking at the next steps.
Right.
So before it gets to 75%, we have it implemented.
Because that's too late. If you wait to 75%, you're going to be behind the eight ball, basically, trying to catch up.
Because you never want to hit 100%.
The problem is, compounded, because we're in a whole new area of consumption where in a given household, if you have some young people in the household, you have parents, young people, you've got, and we talked about this on another program, you've got all these devices. You've got the smartphones, which automatically switch over to our Wi-Fi the minute you walk in the front door.
Yeah. So
they're jumping off of the Verizon 4G network, and they're consuming our bandwidth. So we're actually helping Verizon.
But it's really funny. People aren't aware of this, but you need to be aware of it because it impacts
it does.
the usage.
And so you've got the smartphone, and younger people will be, actually they can stream Netflix, they can do a bunch of stuff on their smartphone. Then you've got tablets, which are, very popular. And so it's conceivable that you could have one person in that house who might have 3 or 4 devices, all consuming bandwidth. And then you've got mom, watching Netflix, dad watching sports. You've got other members of the household. So you can't really calculate the utilization based on a single family dwelling.
That's right.
Because you got to find out who's in that house and what toys do they have.
That's right, and they all have them.
Yes.
But that's what you're saying, David, about that 50%. If you don't stay ahead of it, and that requires investment constantly with these upgrades, then once you get behind the 8 ball, I don't see how you'd ever recover. You really have to stand.
You're scrambling, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Unhappy customers.
That's one thing James will tell us. We don't want unhappy customers, so that upgrade has got to take place constantly.
Yeah, and we listen carefully to our customers. If people call up and say that our internet experience is slow, we can look right at that particular part of the system, and there might be, we've seen a situation where there's a few people doing online games.
Right.
That they're consuming
That
so
will
much
take
bandwidth,
a lot of
it
bandwidth.
slows everybody down, and so then we know we have to break that up and build more capacity in there.
Right. Now, let's move to another area, because this is one, I don't think people, we talked about it a lot over the years, but I don't think people really grasp this concept. Let's talk about programmers and cost, because we were talking before we went on the air. People seem to think somehow this comes out of the sky magically at no cost, and then the company charges people for this programming. Talk to us about the programmers and programming costs.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that, over the course of the last 35, 40 years, there's no question that the content, the programming that's been developed has really improved dramatically. And, there's a lot more content, and it's driven largely by, the audience preference, what they like to watch, and so there's been huge investment in making all of this programming available,
Right.
whether it's sports, movies, special series, dramas, children's programming. So, but unfortunately, I think most people think that the cable company is the culprit in deciding, we're going to charge more for this.
What are the costs going to be?
And really, we'd like to communicate that we have a programming contract with every single network, and they dictate to us what the price will be.
Right.
And over the last several years, the increases, particularly for the sports networks,
They're very, very hot.
double-digit increases for those services. In fact, for 4 services, ESPN, Yes Network,
Right.
Madison Square Garden,
Right.
and Sports Channel New York,
Right.
those 4 channels make up about 1/3 of a cable bill right now.
Right.
And if you and we are required by the programmers, in order to carry them, to provide their service on the most widely distributed tier, which is basic cable.
Right.
So it's all customers have to pay for that, and it puts us in an awkward position, because as cable rates go higher, it impacts people that have economic issues. They want the programming, but it's getting to the point where some of these services are so expensive. But it's not the cable company deciding on these pricing.
Right.
Our goal every year is to try to figure out how can we minimize the increase, because there's going to be an increase. They just send us a certified letter now.
Yeah.
And they say,
here's what
effective,
you will be paying. Yeah.
effective January 1st, 2014, here's what you're going to be paying. And I think the other point that I'd like to make is that it's not just the satellite channels, the cable networks that
Right.
have been driving this increase in pricing. it's also the network television. Years ago, when the cable television industry started, cable operators helped broadcasters, ABC, CBS, and NBC, to distribute their programming to rural areas like our marketplace, because we'd put up a tower
And guarantee great reception.
and we'd run lines out to all the house, and we'd extend their audience. And around 5 or 6 years ago, they decided that because their model of selling advertising wasn't driving enough revenue, that they wanted to charge per subscriber. And it's called retransmission consent. And so now, on top of the sports networks and HBO and all the other cable programmers making big increases in the cost for programming, we've got the networks charging us each year more and more per subscriber to carry CBS, ABC, and NBC. And you know that those networks have a huge audience.
Yes.
It's not something that we can take it off and
No, you can't
not
eliminate
impact the
those.
people.
No.
In fact, many customers probably have seen in the media where Time Warner got into a dispute of carriage with, I think, Fox.
Right.
And they actually
Dropped it
during the World Series. And they got a terrible bad public relations issue out of that and ultimately had to put it back on. The reason that Time Warner did that was they wanted the customers to know it's not them.
Right.
It's the programmers.
There is cost related to programming. And Dave and I were chatting before we went on, and people still don't understand that is not programming that you take at no cost and then charge customers for. There are built-in costs, and again, demands are made. I think it's something that really it needs to be understood, that's where the costs come from.
Yes, and really, if you look at, everybody's aware about the professional athletes and the amazing contracts that you hear about, multi-year, multi-million-dollar,
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
right, and the only way that can be sustained is by increasing the charge, not only at the stadium, if you can get a ticket for a game.
If you're fortunate enough to get one.
Yeah,
yes.
or they charge for the distribution rights to the cable companies. And so it's a catch-22 for us, because we know that if we get a letter saying, here's your increase, like it or not, it's your increase. And if we say, no, we're not going to pay it, they're going to force us to drop the signal, and then the public will react and say, you've got to carry that signal.
That's right. No way to avoid it. James, thank you so much, as always, for joining us.
Jim.
We appreciate it. James Reynolds, President of Mid-Hudson Cablevision. My old pal, Dave Finger, Chief Engineer.
Very well.
Chief Engineer. That was good.
You got
I
it.
remember
You
that.
got it.
We'll be right back after a few messages.
Looking to spice up your table? Mid-Hudson Cable invites you to travel with us and meet the chef. Join host Jim Riley as he gives you an intimate look at some of the area's best eateries, from the burger joint down the street to a 4-star restaurant. Meet the people behind the scenes who prepare some of the best dishes in the area. Thursday and Sunday at 8 p.m., Saturday at 11 and 8 p.m., with a new episode each month, only on Channel 11. Meet the Chef, available exclusively on Mid-Hudson Cable.
Welcome back. My guest for this portion of the show is Bill Hollenbeck, Mayor of Hudson.
Hello again?
It's nice to get together once in a while. Now, you were just recently reelected.
Correct.
I'm not surprised. I'm
Correct.
pleased.
Well, thank you.
I'm pleased, but not surprised. Tell us now where you're going to start from this year, kind of your vision of what's coming up.
Well, and I appreciate the compliment, over the next couple of years, we're going to continue to provide the quality of life that we provide to our residents. We're going to continue to save money where we can save in our departments without cutting services. And there's a couple of really important things going on over the next 2 years as far as I'm concerned, one of which is parking considerations in the city of Hudson. We have a serious parking dilemma right now, and it's only going to get worse course, with the consideration of the Marina Abramovich Art Center,
Right.
which may be coming in shortly, and the fact that there was just a proposition for casinos, as you know,
Right.
7 casinos
It's going to
in
generate much
New
more
York State.
activity within the
And we
region,
may
yeah.
have one close to the city of Hudson also. So parking is the main consideration for my administration, as well as the truck route and
Yes, the
trying
truck
to
route is always
circumvent
an issue.
that out of the city of Hudson
Yeah.
because of infrastructure damage
Right.
and the fact that we don't generate that truck traffic anymore.
Right.
The truck route basically is being used as a way to get from point A to point B
Right.
through the city of Hudson. And our charter revision, our codes and our charter have not been revised in many years. And working with other, and I can't mention them right now,
Right.
but hopefully the potential of working with a university to revise our charter will be the focus of this administration.
I think the reason why I like that you're doing that is nobody wants to do it because it's such a really a devastating change devastating is not the term I'm looking for, but it's big. It's
It
big.
is.
And
It
it's very
certainly
hard to
is.
wrestle with that. So the best way to do it is not look at it, but
Correct.
you're going to take it head on.
Absolutely. And we hope to have that accomplished within a year. So there was a charter revision that just occurred in New York City,
Right.
Which took about a year and a half. So for a city that size, and then you have Hudson, 2.7 square miles with some of the things we have in our charter, I think it's possible within a year to make that happen.
That's terrific. Again, God bless you for taking it on, but
Thank you.
sometimes you have to do that. You just have to be aggressive and say, this needs to be
No,
done.
you do, and it's time. Listen, some of the considerations that were in our charter over the years, aren't suitable for the way the city of Hudson is right now.
We change.
And we do.
Yeah.
And we have, and for the better, and I hope to have the charter changed for the better also with this revision.
That's really what it takes. I want to get back to parking for a minute because one of the things that we know is that the city of Hudson is a fabulous place to shop, particularly along Warren Street, but in many areas. I like Hudson a lot. I'm a Greene County guy,
Thank
but I
you.
love to come over here to Hudson and
And
enjoy
we
it.
like Greene County as well.
It's that whole idea of the Twin County.
Sure.
And the fact is that the merchants need your support for parking as well. Isn't that true?
Yeah, no question. The parking is a complex issue. The reality is we need to generate revenue, so we have, our meters that, we focus on for that revenue. But with everything that Hudson is realizing now, especially in the summer months and even with our winter walk and different events in the city of Hudson, has, and for our residents, parking has become critical. And it's only going to get worse, and now is the time to look at, not have tunnel vision, but to look at the future in regards to what we can do to make parking better. And with the consideration for one of the casinos to be close to the city of Hudson.
Yeah, it's now a reality.
Be it
It's
Greene
gonna
County or Columbia, because
It's gonna
even the
happen.
governor's office will tell you that they're putting together a site review committee over the next 6 months to look for those sites. Marina Abramovich, who has raised close to $10 million already for a $20 million art center at the old Arthur's Court Community Theater.
Mm-hmm.
These are going to generate this is going to generate even more traffic. I'm going to propose, and I'm meeting this week with representatives and private representatives to consider a 4-tier parking garage in the municipal lot right behind City Hall, off of Columbia Street, similar to what the hospital just did.
Which they did a nice job there. That works very, very well.
Absolutely, and not only will it generate some revenue for the city of Hudson with obvious parking fees, it will also open up, hopefully, about 400 parking spots if we can do that.
Yeah, you can't have events and not have guaranteed parking. You can't.
Absolutely.
And like you said, if you wait until the casino issue is settled and this art center is developed, it's too late. You can't wait. You can't wait for that.
You're absolutely correct.
I like that. Now, we were chatting a little bit before we went on the air, and we were talking about the police station.
Yes.
Now, I know that that's been there a long time. I don't want to say antiquated, but let's face it, it's something that needed to be addressed. You tell
Sure.
me you're doing something with that.
Absolutely. And I'm sure most of the viewers have seen that the consideration within the city of Hudson has been to provide, over the last 19 years, by the way, to provide a new police station for our men and women of law enforcement, and to provide the mandated court facility
Right, there are things
by
that
the
have to
Office
be
of
done.
Court Administration.
Correct.
And this is it hasn't fallen on deaf ears, but the projects in the past haven't happened.
Right.
Approximately 3-4 years ago, there was a consideration for, through the Galvin Foundation, a police and court to be located at 4th and Columbia Street with affordable housing above that. That didn't happen. The consideration prior to that was the potential for a brand new building up on Green Street. Have video was being looked at. I give members of the council a lot of credit for looking into the possibility of providing the police and court, much needed police and court facility at the old Finish Line.
Right.
That some of your viewers may be familiar with
Right.
at
Having been
701
members there.
Union Street.
Yeah.
I'm happy to report that on Friday the Common Council approved purchasing the building and the $2.5 million total renovation
To get
of
that done.
that building.
So the process is now underway.
Absolutely, absolutely, and the bid process will occur now. We'll wait for the bids to come back. Hopefully, they're within the range that
That you need to have to make it happen, yeah.
Absolutely, but it's been approved, and I'm excited. I'm excited for our law enforcement. Excited for the state employees of our court system, because they're state employees that work in the court, to have a new facility. And I'm very excited for the residents who depend on the police and or in a fortunate and or unfortunate circumstance have to visit a court facility. They'll be able to visit a new facility for both.
Right, and they'll be served in a much more efficient and more responsible manner. And I think
Absolutely.
that's terribly important. That's why it's important to address these issues up front and be aggressive, because they have to happen. You can't wait till something happens to you.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, one thing we didn't do, and we should do this before we leave today, I know when you took on this position as mayor a while back,
Sure.
you certainly had a vision, otherwise you wouldn't have run for mayor.
Sure.
And now you've had the experience, and you've been in the office, and now just recently reelected. What do you see out on the horizon? What's your vision for the city of Hudson as mayor? Share some of that with us.
Yeah, well, I think you see the vision of not only I, but past administrations and even Mayor Scalera in regards to what our business district has become, what the city of Hudson has become as far as a tourist destination. Our waterfront is very important. We have the ability right now to develop on our waterfront, and the time has come to do that. It's very difficult in governing any municipality when, and luckily through checks and balances we have an executive and legislative branch, when you bring a lot of personalities together, and those personalities bring with them their visions as well.
Right.
But we seriously need to consider what type of development, when we're going to be developing our waterfront. We need to continue to support our business district and small business,
Right.
which is
Critically important to the
critically important, because that's why the city of Hudson right now is thriving like it is. We need to continue to be cognizant of our affordable housing and make sure that the landlords that are in the city of Hudson are beginning to realize that they have to provide a place that's habitable for people to live in, spaces fit for human habitation, not just places that they can collect their
Right.
rents
gotta be
and
a
allow a
win-win.
family with
Right.
children
Yeah.
to live under conditions that aren't acceptable
Right.
anymore in the city of Hudson. We've tried to do that. We've I think put a dent in that also, and we need to continue to support our services. The city of Hudson, I think, is a municipality and a city that offers probably the best services that we can provide with what we budget for
Right.
these services. And I support them. They do a fantastic job, and we'll continue, believe me, we'll continue to do more in the next 2 years with less, as we've done over the last 2.
Right. It's nice to have that great staff to work with us, support your efforts and vision.
And it's unbelievable. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention people like the City Hall staff and, my mayor aide, Eugene Chesky, who's been fantastic, and, being able to work with Council President Moore, and even from a city attorney standpoint with Cheryl Roberts and Carl Giffey-Whitbeck,
Right.
and that staff who do a lot of legal stuff daily for the mayor and the council.
Well, you take the not only leadership but the responsibility, but a very powerful team is terribly important, isn't it?
Yeah, no question.
It is. Bill Hollenbeck, Mayor of Hudson,
Thank you, sir.
thanks
It's
so
a pleasure.
much.
It's always a pleasure to
Always
be
a
here.
pleasure. And we talked to our producer, Steve Mortifolio, and we're going to arrange this so maybe every 6 months we get together and we give people an update. Is that
Fantastic.
good?
I'd love to keep you updated, as well as the viewers of Cable Connection.
They like that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank
we
you.
also want to thank James Reynolds, President of Mid-Hudson Cablevision, and Dave Finger, who's the Chief Engineer of Mid-Hudson Cablevision. Most of all, we want to thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you real soon on All the Right Connections.
Welcome to Smart Home from Mid-Hudson Cable, a monitoring solution that brings the power of video to protect your family and home. Using cameras installed by Mid-Hudson Cable technicians, you can check in on your pets, be notified when your children get home, or look in on the nanny. Starting at just $14.95 a month, use your smartphone to monitor your home or business. Call today to learn how Smart Home can help you.